Hello everyone. So till now we had seen how we can work with components and states and props and all such. So using the knowledge that we had learned earlier, today we'll be extending this knowledge and we'll be working with forms. We'll try to work with forms in a React application. So this was the example that was used where there were multiple players and their scores were there, and essentially these players and the scores were hard coded. So if you remember, this was an array, and objects were created like with properties names of player name having John as a value, player score with some value, then David as a player name. So these players were hard coded, right? And this was an array of objects, right? So in this video what we'll do is we'll try to create a form somewhere over here in the application, and the player name and the scores, the new player names and the new scores will be added from that form. Okay, we'll try to achieve this in this example, and during this example we will use the concepts that were used that we have learned earlier. So I hope you remember. If you have not watched my earlier videos, kindly watch them so that you can proceed with this example. Okay, so let us quickly jump into our code. So for this let us create a component file inside our components folder, naming it as playerform.js. okay, this is a new component file that we're creating, and let's import the necessary. Let's import React from React library, and since this is a component, so we'll be writing out the function name, component name, const player form, and let's make it an arrow function. You can also make it a normal function, but I'm using this arrow function notation. Okay, so essentially it will return a form. It will return something, right? It will return a form here. So we'll create the form from this in this component itself, and it will export. In the end it will export itself, so it will export as default. So player form. Now since it is a form, so we will have input type, and we need input type text because we have to type the text, and also let us give it a label as let's say player name. Now this let us put this inside a div, and just copy this and let us paste it inside the div. Okay, so we have done this for the player name part, and let's copy this entire div thing, and let's again paste this, and we will do the same for player score part. And since this is a component and it returns only one element, only one JSX element at a time, so this entire form thing, which contains this multiple HTML elements, so let us create a div and wrap it around this div. Let us wrap this entire form inside this div section. Okay, fine. So what we have here is a form which contains the player name and player score as input types, and also let us give a button having type as submit, let us just add, let's just give it a name. Let's add new player. Okay, now we have this form in our component named player form.js, which we will include, or you can say we can import this form in our app.js file. So let's import this, import player form from this path. Okay, so this player form component has been imported to this app.js, and let's add this as the JSX player form. Let's add this component inside this. So we have added player form, and let's see the output. So we have this form as the output, right? Now if we type anything over here, if we type anything, it will not work, right? It will not it doesn't add any meaning to it. It's just a simple plain form. So what we need is, if we pass some data over here, let's say Marty is a player and Marty has his score 85. So if we add this player, so this data should be grabbed somewhere, right? It should be stored somewhere. So let's just do this thing. Let's go to this player form component, and let us add some meaning to it, like say whenever we have some changes, okay, whenever we have some changes in the text value, that in the input type text, let's say whenever we have some changes in this input box, let's record these changes. So how to do this? So for that we will have to use this use state. Let's use this hook use state, and for that we have imported this use state hook from the React library. And on this on this changing event effect, let us call a function. Let's say player name, right? So pname handler. So this is a function. You can give it any name. I've given it pname handler, and I'll create this function somewhere over here, and whenever you will have any change of values, this pname handler function will be called. So let's write this function, and pname handler. Okay, so I've written it in a arrow function way, so you can write it in a normal function way also. Okay, so similarly what we'll do is we'll also have an on change event for the player score input, and I'll name it p score handler. Okay, now similarly we'll create a function for the p score, and I'll rename it, right? So now what we are left to do is that we have not used this use state function for keeping the values that we want to change. So I'm writing this use state, and I am defining that initially the value will be null. So whenever some changes occur, these changes should be recorded, right? So for that use state, since it is a function, it will return something. So here it will return an array. So this array will contain two elements. One is a variable name, let's call it pname, and other is a function, which will help, this function will help to change or to set the name of that particular player and pass that name to this variable, and this variable instead will be like it will record the changes, right? So let's put this variable, and this, let's put this variable over here, p name, right? So similarly we'll have a const, we'll have a use state for the p score part, right? So let's name it p score, and this p score will be, I'll copy this p score and I'll have this as value, and okay, since this is a variable, so we'll put it inside curly braces. So we have this input type text for p name, for player name, and on changing the values this function will be called, and inside this function something we'll do something, right? Will the demand for the application will be written here. Whatever the application demands will be written here. So in our case, the application demands that we set the p name, here, okay, and here also we write set p score. So whenever some changes are occurring, this function will be called, and inside this function the set name will perform its duty. Okay, so what we pass here is a changing value, and that is taking place with the help of an event. So here we write event. Similarly for this part also we write event. Okay, so here we record this event dot value, event dot target dot value. Same thing goes here also, event dot target dot value. Okay, so what it essentially means is that whenever you're putting some value in this input box, okay, it is set with the help of this useState function, and useState function uses this function to set the value, and it puts inside this pname variable, which is again kept in this value part of the player name. And same thing goes with this p score, and p score handler function also performs the same as done with the player name part, right? So now what we have essentially is that if we type a player name and if we type the score, it doesn't give us any new meaning even after writing so much of code, right? So let's check it inside the console. If we have something, nothing is shown as output. Why? Because we have not given any output here, right? So if we submit the button, let's say, let us call an event on submit, and let us give a function here. Let's say submit handler, and let us write this function. Let us write this function submit handler since it is an event handler, so we are passing this event. Okay, so whenever a function is called by an event, you pass this event. This event is an object. It will be passed because you have called this function from an event. So now let us check this, that on passing this, but on pressing this button, add new player, what we are having here. Let's say I want to have Marty as a value and 85 as score. So it reloads. Can you see this? It reloads the page. So we don't want this behavior, because in React we don't reload the pages, right? So we have to stop this behavior, and for that we can write this function. Whenever we press this button, this function will be called, and this function, first thing what it will do is it will stop this default behavior. For that you can write prevent default. So this function will stop the default behavior of a form, which is that whenever a form is given and a form is submitted, it refreshes the page. Let's say I want to give this, so see, now it's not reloading, so it will not reload now, right? So we have successfully achieved this part. The form reloading has stopped, right? So next thing is that we have to create a object. Let's say let's name it player data, and let's put the values inside it. Let's put the values. This is an object that we are creating, and let's put the values as player name, and these are properties, and the value will be p data, I guess. Yeah, p name and p score. Okay, for player name we are writing p name, and for player score as a property we are using p score. So these two data are inside this player data object. And now if we print the data, if we console.log the player data object, what we will have is something like this. Now just check what I'm trying to do here. If I add Marty and if I add his score, let's say 99, now if I click this button, now if you see here, an object is created here. See this? Can you see this? An object having player name Marty and player score 99 is created here. And if I add another player, let's say Nick, and let's give him, let's say 80, so it will add another player, right? So that way we can go on adding players. Let's say Richard, and let's give him another score. So there's another player, so we have 3 objects now, right? So each one having their own property name and their values, right? So that way you can add values from a form. Now one last thing is that these values, after adding these values, this input boxes are not cleared, right? So we have to clean this input box after pressing this button. So how we can achieve this is we can just call this function set p name, and we can set it to null. After printing it onto the screen, we can set into null. So p score, and set the values to null. So now if we perform the same thing, let's say Steve, and let's give him 75. See, we have this object having Steve as player name and 75 as player score, and the value from these boxes are cleared. The data has been cleaned. And for the next, let's say let's give a name, let's say Joe and 85. So we have another object, having another name, new name, and a value, and this text boxes are cleaned. So that way you can add values from a form in a React application. And in the next video I will show you how to take that value and add inside this application, so that you can dynamically or it becomes more interactive from a form. Whenever you are giving the data, it becomes more interactive. So in this example I'll show you how to add the data that you just passed from this form. This will add in this list, right? So thank you guys for watching this video, and if you have any issues in understanding, you can just comment in the comment section below, and keep watching my videos guys, and thank you.